am David King, the editor and associate publisher of The Collaborative, joined by Katie Cusack, editor, and Stan Horaczek, who is the technology editor at Popular Science. And it's sort of amazing. I've followed your career for a while, and we're acquaintances and such. but I mean, you've had such a career in magazine publishing and essentially remotely. I mean, it seems like a lot of the time you've spent working from and traveling to the center of the publishing world. Yeah, it's weird. My current schedule, our office is on Park Avenue in New York City, and I'm there roughly once a week. Wow. Now still. So I take the Amtrak, and I've been doing that for, roughly a little over a decade now. So for various companies. So yeah, it's been weird, but it's been good. I started working in digital really early, and as a result, they've let me keep working in digital and, just make good stuff, and, people keep you around. At least that's the hope. I mean, I totally related to you because I did it for about 8 years at Gotham Gazette traveling, but I think it was maybe twice, two or three times a month, and even that turned into something very monumental for me when I had a child. It felt like separation anxiety and stuff. Right. And you have a family, and it just impresses me to know that you found a way to make this work. And so I started. My career is a little weird because I started working in magazines when I lived in the city. I used to live in the city a long time ago. The magazines I've worked for the past 10 years, I've never worked for them before. Right. But when I started my career, I lived in New York City. We lived in Manhattan for a while, and then we moved out to Queens because I had a kid, and living in Manhattan with a kid seems like punishment for crimes I didn't commit. But we moved out to Queens, and it was taking me. If you don't know anything about Queens, it's imagine that the airport is here and the prison is here and my apartment was here, and it was taking me an hour back and forth every day. Oof. And when my daughter was born, it just got kind of weird. You'd work until publishing. You don't work until 5. You work until whenever. And then you had at least another hour to get home. And I was writing about tech and stuff because I worked at, hilariously, Maxim magazine was my first job out of college. And so I was going to events and stuff, and it got to be kind of a grind. And then, compared to what I do now, you figure I have 6 hours, 3 hours door to door to my office from my house, but I do it 1 day a week. So when I was doing it in Queens, I end up winning in this scenario. And so tell us a little bit about how you did break into publishing and how you've managed. I mean, it's not an easy. It's not. No, it's a weird thing. I remember very specifically. I went to NYU when I was for my undergrad. I say for my undergrad as if I did any graduate work, which I didn't. I definitely haven't. But I went to NYU, and I very specifically remember on the very first day of my intro to communications class, they were like, well, magazines aren't going to exist in 10 years and newspapers are going to be gone and all this stuff. And I was like, oh no, what am I doing here? And then I got an internship, when I was a sophomore, and I lied to an independent music magazine and told them that I was a junior because I thought that would make me more attractive. The magazine was called Law of Inertia, which I think is now Death and Taxes, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's still kicking around. And I started writing reviews for them, as a student. And I wrote a couple of cover stories in the next year just because, it was really fun. And so then I used that, and I got an internship at Maxim magazine when I was a senior. And I think I got it because, honestly, I saw that it was for digital. It was for working on the web. This was 2003, 2004. So the web wasn't as important then. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I was like, sure. Yeah, I'm, my concentration's in digital media. So I went and I really hit it off with a lot of people who work there. I did my internship. It was a paying internship, if you can believe that.
Wow. What a different time.
Right? Yeah. And then I left. I came back on a freelance basis after I graduated, and I became an editorial assistant. And it was literally that entry-level job where I met a ton of really smart and cool people who have given me every opportunity that I've had since then. One of the guys I worked with, John Wild, he's a high up editor at GQ. Some of the editors, the editor of Entrepreneur, I met him
when I worked there. So like we were making this like dumb content, but we were like, it was the smartest group of people I ever worked with. And so like it's been just since then, like, kind of just moving along through the networks.
Yeah.
And how much turmoil have you had to deal with?
I've been super lucky. When I moved back here, I quit Maxim because the industry was in a really weird spot. And like a lot of other magazines, Maxim or Dennis Publishing or Alpha Media Group or whatever you want to call it back then, it just got sold a bunch of times, And we were like, it was no... we would go into work and be like, are we going to get fired or are we going to get a bonus? Like, we just didn't know. And that sort of set the tone for like working in media for a really long time. And when I left there, I went to an internet startup company and I launched a site for them. And then the 2008 downturn happened and they were like, bye. So now I'm like, okay, I moved because I had this remote job working for a web startup, but now I live here. And now I have to try and find a gig in media from here to work. And luckily, a friend of mine had just started working at Hachette Filipaki, which is like a magazine company that still makes magazines. And he was like, we have this photography magazine and this like electronics magazine, and they need an editor to do stuff on the web. Can you come and do this? And I was like, okay, let me go interview. And I had tried to figure out like, okay, I can stay in the city for like 3 days a week and then I can come home on Thursday or whatever. And like this really terrible schedule that I was like willing to do. And the guy was like, well, look, the fact that you're willing to do all that suggests to me that we don't need to babysit you. So let's try it and see. And then it ended up being really good. And I ended up working for Popular Photography for like 8 years until it closed 2 years ago.
Wow.
And that was really, really fun. I don't know if that's an interesting story or not.
Yeah.
But it's a weird way to work in this industry, I think. I've had like a really weird path that I'm super grateful to be able to have done. And I think now you can do it a lot differently than I did. But I just got really lucky in a lot of ways.
Are there any trends that you've noticed in media nowadays, like in our current situation where there are these magazines and newspapers sort of dropping off and people don't really know where to go, where you've had this experience and, do you consider it luck that you were going into digital media and then like the web really took off? Like, do you see something similar to that nowadays that people should be jumping into?
For content, it's really hard. I mean, especially on a day like today, like we got the Vice news today, like in the, BuzzFeed laid off 200 people last week. Vice is laying off 250 people this week, and Huffington Post, last week too. So like,
yeah,
it's going to be really weird. For the next year is going to be really weird because there are more opportunities, but at the same time, there are going to be a lot of contract opportunities. And people who are doing freelance work, we just got like 600 really talented freelancers who are now going to be competing for that work.
Right.
So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. I think there's been a lot of articles calling it the digital content bubble. I don't know how I feel about that as much as it's like a company bubble or companies where they lost some. Facebook kind of messed with everybody a little bit, by like making some promises that didn't exactly come true. So I honestly, I don't know what's going to happen. Like if you ask me what the trend is right now, it's to fire everybody,
right?
Which is bad. But I think there's going to be a lot of smaller opportunities too. Like I think this idea of individuals as influencers is going to start to grow into influencers as like small companies, where like the content companies are going to become like one person's going to grow to like a team of 5 people, like I think that's where it has to go, where it's going to be these small clusters because it doesn't seem reasonable to be BuzzFeed anymore. Like Vice having 2,500 employees, it seems so hard to do in 2019.
And so, some of the stories you do, maybe it's just because I'm a geek, but you get to do some amazing stuff. I know you cover these technology conferences that I'm jealous of, all sorts of stuff. You get hands-on with things that a lot of people don't get to see for a while. What's some of your favorite things to cover and to be involved in.
It's a real weird thing. So our editor in chief, Joe Brown, is he's a really cool guy, but he sometimes will remind you when you're being a wimp about stuff, and you're not asking for enough. And so last year, he assigned us this thing where he said, I want everybody to take a day off and go find a story and go report it. Like go out, interview people, see stuff, do a thing. And at the same time, Kodak was doing this thing where they were bringing back a film. I'm a big camera nerd. And Kodak was bringing back this film. And I knew that the factory is in Rochester. So I was like, I bet I could go to the factory and let them take me around if I could get them this story. So I was like, hey, can I just come to your factory and see all your secret machines and take all these pictures? And they were like, okay, sure. And I went out and got to do this awesome photo essay that I've just wanted to do forever. And it turned out to be the most successful thing I did last year, which was awesome that people were into it, because I thought maybe this is just me being a nerd and no one's going to care about this, right. But I still would have been stoked to do it. But then it turned out that a lot of people cared about it. And I think that to me was an important sort of point for me in my career where I was like, you know what, if we just take stuff that we're curious about and really just nerd out about it, other people are probably curious about it too. So it's been really fun to try and explore that. One of the guys, I had a meeting with IMAX, the company that makes IMAX screens. And when they did the demo, their TV had backlighting on it. There was a glow coming from behind the TV. And I was like, that's cool. Is that a IMAX thing? And he goes, no, those are $20 LED strips I brought off of Amazon. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, it's, home theater guys do that all the time. It's a trick we do. And I was like, no kidding. So I interviewed him and I was like, oh yeah, buy this $20 thing. And that was one of my most successful stories of the year, was just this little tip that I learned. Yeah. And people were like, wow, this is cool. I'm going to do this. And that kind of stuff, it amuses me to no end. Cause I love seeing stuff like that. So it's been cool to, and then there's also I get to play with gadgets. You're right. A lot of times I carry around three cell phones at a time. It's very dumb. My daughter got to get an exclusive Fortnite skin because I got the Samsung phone early. So yeah, it's definitely sometimes it's stressful, but you have to take a moment and be like, this job is pretty cool.
My daughter says she plays Fortnite, but she's only seen people play it in Roblox in the remake. She's only 5, so we're going to try to stave off Fortnite for some time. But
by the time she's old enough, it'll be gone. It'll be something else.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Something new.
Yeah, not that long of everything comes and goes so quickly.
Yeah, we do this thing every year called Best of What's New, and they've been doing it for it's a thing PopSci has been doing for 30 years. So every time we do it, there's a lot of pressure to make it good and make it cool.
Right.
And this year, one of the things we included on the list of entertainment was Fortnite. And I think it's, if you were going to talk about the most important things in entertainment this year, Fortnite would be it, because it was huge. It unified the consoles. It got millions of viewers. It brought celebrity culture into Twitch streamer culture. Those are all really culturally relevant things. But that didn't stop people from being like, you're an idiot. You ruined it. How dare you call Fortnite? And
don't talk about Fortnite. Yeah. It can only be in memes. That's right. The only way that it can exist.
Right. So it's one of those things that it gets a very strong reaction. And that's part of, working at a general interest place. Can we write about Fortnite in a way that our readers are going to like? And I don't know. Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So. Yeah.
So talking about film, obviously you're a big photographer. Your work is pretty amazing, and you do local gigs a lot too. How have you sort of? I believe it's something you've been doing since high school, right? I
actually weirdly how I got into picture taking story is oddly depressing because it started on 9/11. I lived in New York City when 9/11 happened, and we lived on 10th Street on Broadway, which was below the demilitarized zone. So we had to show our IDs to get back to our dorm and stuff if you wanted to go below 14th Street. And one of my really best friends and I, we were like, well, we're hungry And like, we sort of didn't understand the full scope of it. Like, it was like a really weird day.
Yeah.
So we like took bandanas and put them around our mouths because like the dust was crazy. And we grabbed our skateboards and we went skateboarding down the middle of Broadway at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whenever, like roughly around sunset. And like, we were going down the middle of Broadway,
Yeah.
New York City Broadway. And I very much remember like the light and the dust hanging and being like, I really wish I could just take a picture of this. Like, that was a really profound moment for me. And like, that was the first time in my head that I was just like, you know what, it would be really cool if I had a camera and I could just remember this. And like, that thought sort of stuck in my brain for the next couple of like a year. And then my parents helped me buy a camera. My dad gave me his old film camera and I just fell super hard for it. I was just like, this is amazing. I love this. And like, I was interested in the technical aspect and the social aspect and all of it. And then, and also I figured out that like, hey, if I can give magazines words and photos, that makes me more valuable to them. And so I just started doing it, and I still love it. Like, I have a film camera that I carry around in my pocket all the time. It's my little film camera. That's
Wow.
yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Oh, very cool.
It's just right there.
Yeah, and
I think my mom still has these.
yeah, and it's so funny. Like, it's had a real renaissance. Like, these things used to be, this thing sold for $80 when it was new, and now it's $200 on the secondary market
Yeah.
if you can find a working one.
It's like Polaroids. Like,
Yeah.
Polaroids are expensive.
So yeah, I do it, and you know, I just do it because I really like it. I worked at a photography magazine. You know, like, I was freelancing for a lot of general interest pubs, but like, my full time was at a photography magazine, and I really thought, like, if I don't shoot all the time and I don't really just like live it, then like, why is anybody going to listen to anything that I
Yeah.
say? So like, I just started working and shooting like small, regional magazine jobs, local stuff. I shoot a couple weddings every year, which is like, some people get about, but
Right.
I just put it, right? Like, I mean, it's, I know a lot of creatives watch this and like, part-time wedding photographers are like the most hated kind of creative because it's so awesome. Because like, I get to hang out, I get to like enjoy this benefit of just picking exactly the clients that I want. Like, I've never had a bad wedding. I've never had a bad client because I can pick and choose. And that's usually something that like you have to work for 20 years to get, but
Yeah.
I just sort of kind of got it immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Like, put a camera in my hand. Let's do it. Let's whatever it is.
Well, your photography story, I mean, rings true to me because I was at SUNY Purchase at 9/11, and I believe it was sophomore year.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, so I was at the school paper at the time, and I was sort of flirting with it. I wasn't sure I was going to go into journalism because my family, my mom had a history as a reporter. It felt like the easy fallback, and I needed to go to school for something more exciting, is what I told myself. And then, I was asked to cover it for the school paper, and obviously a lot of folks at Purchase had family members, and
Sure.
it was chaos and panic. And I remember leaving the campus and, just being surrounded by armed personnel carriers and like, what is going on?
Right.
And obviously we weren't in the city, but, that's when it sort of stuck for me that I wanted to,
it's like,
pursue journalism. But
yeah, really profound moments like that. Like,
Yeah.
they make a big difference. And like, I still think back to it sometimes where it's just like, my buddy and I, we haven't done it the past couple of years, but we used to just go to Ben's Pizza, which is like, if you ever watched Lucky Louie, it's like the pizza place at the beginning, because we were standing there on McDougal Street in New York City, and like, you could look south and see, the smoke coming up, and you could look onto the McDougal Street, which is like this crazy crowded street in New York City, and these hippies had dragged a trampoline into the middle of the intersection, and we're jumping on it, and like, we're playing frisbee and hacky sack in the middle of this intersection. And like, we used to go back to that pizza place like around, not specifically for that, but just it was like a tradition for a while. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it again this year, I think.
very cool.
Make it remember. But
So another aspect of your persona or your life is your connection to music, and
Yeah.
I know you're connected to the hardcore scene and the punk rock and whatever you want to call it. But I'm just wondering how it had an influence on you and what your sort of favorite stuff was, just given that we can talk about it.
yeah, no, I think it was. So I was in high school like 96 to 2000, which I think was sort of a golden age for Albany stuff,
Yep.
and like, I I wasn't like a fixture or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, I was just a guy who I really liked going to shows. You know, like if Down Foundation was playing, I was gonna go. You know, and I get to see One King Down a bunch of times, and Indecision, and you know, it was a really cool time, and I think that music and that scene had a very specific lifestyle, and I think it was harder to do that back then. Like now it's really easy to just pick up a lifestyle because you have access to it, you know, and there's so much. Like I was like sending checks in the mail to Equal Vision, you know, like to get records.
Yep.
And like that's a thing that you don't really have to do anymore. Like I was sending, I forgot what, there was like a big paper catalog too that I remember like sending, like having my mom write me a check and then sending it in an envelope and like hoping records came back, and they would like 6 weeks later or something like that. And I think that was it was a lifestyle, and I think it was harder to do that back then. I think it's very easy to like fall into a lifestyle now because you can just immerse yourself in things and it's easier to move through them. But like back then I just couldn't get enough of it. And when I, like I said, my very first gig was Law of Inertia, which was like a little indie music magazine. And like I wrote a cover story about Most Precious Blood. Like I had a big picture spread about Hope's Fall, you know, like these bands that were so like cool and important for me back then. And, you know, that's really how, and then I started working for Revolver. I did a bunch of freelance work for them. And then, you know, it sort of transitioned because it became cool for a while. Like I did a profile of, 18 Visions for Revolver. You know, like that was the crossover point. And like, I think it was always very like, there was a very DIY ethics about it. And I don't know. I have very fond memories of all that stuff. And like, I don't go to shows that much anymore. I went and saw One King Down. You know?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
When they played around here, I was so excited to be able to go back and do that. But you know, it felt old. And, you know, now I go, Indecision plays once a year and I go to that. And I try to go when I can. I've actually gone to more this year. I went to see Harm's Way at that was fun. The
I didn't get there, but I wanted. Yeah, that was a show I wanted to see.
What is it? It's called the Fuse Box now.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know. I think it formed a lot of my. There was a lot of talk about like being strong to your convictions, and like I'm still, whether you label it or not, straight edge. Like I still don't drink, I still don't smoke or any of that, and that's, you know, just stuck with me for a long time. And I think that's sort of indicative of like those people were so creative and cool and just so fun. Like I look back on it very fondly. It was really important to me. I'm too fat and old for it now, but
I have the same problem, and kids, and you don't get to shows, but yeah, I mean, it still sort of haunts Albany in a lot of ways that this once existed, and it informs a lot of the folks who are successful now, who came and saw sort of, you know, came from that and saw something there.
Sure, because you can draw that straight line from Albany to Syracuse to Buffalo to Integrity. You know, like you can sort of, there's like that straight line of that time frame, you know, like when Victory was around and stuff like that. And
Equal Vision.
Right, sure. EVR, of course, man. I had that. I had like an EVR comp that I just played until it died. It had Can We Start Again by Bane, and then it went right into whatever that Trial song is. Which, by the way, if you like old hardcore and you haven't listened to Trial, that's like, if you come away with one thing, just listen. There's a Trial LP.
It's just whole thing.
Yeah, it's called Are These Our Lives, and it is one of my favorite metalcore albums of all time. It is unbelievably good. So it's my musical recommendation is to listen to that on the treadmill.
So where else should people pick up your work?
So right now I'm concentrating mostly on my full-time job because we just switched to quarterly. So if you haven't seen an issue of Popular Science in a long time, you should pick one up because we're putting out these. It's like 110 edit pages an issue, which is a ton of pages.
Yeah.
And we have this. You know, I know I'm biased, but our staff is so absurdly smart and cool and like young. Like our staff is like 60% just like young female geniuses, which is amazing. Like when I go into the office, it kind of feels like one of those scenarios where like they're the like football team ready to play for the championship, and I'm like the old wise janitor who's just like has all this life experience and is like, well, like that's how I feel.
You'll get there.
Like they're all literal geniuses. But the magazine is really cool. So we've been concentrating on that a lot. Don't mess us up with popular mechanics. We don't tell you how to fix your house in our magazine. It's a lot of...
I wouldn't understand that anyway.
Yeah. And then, I've been doing some stuff for Edible. I've been doing... right now I'm working on one of the biggest photo editorial projects I've ever done. It's for the next issue of Popular Science. It's going to be a really cool story about people who fix things. I can't talk super a lot about it because it's for the next issue, but I can tell you that I think the plan is to run it as like 5 or 6 double trucks in the issue and well. So it is something I'm going to be putting a lot of work into. Double trucks means 2-page spreads. I don't know if everybody who...
No, most people don't. But.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. And then... also, just like I've been doing a lot of local business stuff lately for photo stuff and for the local EMTs and emergency responders. Oh. Because my friend Robbie McHugh, who's a really smart guy, he might be a good guest for this someday, actually, because he helps the local EMTs and stuff with their media outreach and with their websites and stuff to get more social and stuff. And so I've been taking photos for them, and that's been really cool. And local businesses who just would otherwise have a Facebook page with smartphone photos.
Yeah.
It's that's a bummer. So it lets me mess around a little bit. So in terms of regular freelancing, I've been toning it down a little bit just to give myself some sanity.
And so for folks who might want to be on your list for wedding photography, how should they go to your Facebook page?
Yeah,
what do you suggest?
It's I only take roughly 10 a year. If I think I can manage it, and I try not to take too many in this area because at least that's my one courtesy to the full-time guys around here is that I try to spread mine out.
Right.
I'll do 2 Albany, Vermont, Connecticut, Long Island. I don't mind poaching from the Long Island guys, to be honest. But yeah, at Stan Horaczek is me, and then at Stay True Photography is my Instagram for where I'll post wedding stuff. But honestly, I don't post a ton because I'm not a marketing guy. Yeah. My wife has, on many occasions been you could just probably do photography full time. I'm like, yeah, the part of the photography business where you put the camera in my hand and set me loose, I'm a monster. I have not afraid of anything. I'll shoot whatever thing, but you put a piece of paperwork in front of me and I am a sack full of old lunch meat who cannot manage my own. So that's why it's always been really hard.
In terms of putting those photo stories together and going out and shooting and being free to sort of interpret what's happening around you, for other photographers, what would you recommend as the best way to craft a photo story?
Sure. So I think one of the things that really helps me is that I'm a reporter. I learned to report. Mm-hmm. And I think a thing that I see kind of often is that you get really cool photos, but you don't get enough context with them. And being able to ask questions, because it kind of sucks, right? You just want to go out, take the camera, and then shoot the pictures and then be done. But when you do a big photo essay story, unless you have a writer with you to get that stuff, you have to be asking questions. Yep. And have a ton of audio recordings. And the hardcore photojournalism guys, they know that. That's just the way of the world. But having nice photos isn't enough. And you have to just really try and do the reporting and give the context. And I know that it sucks and it's tedious, but you got to send the fact checkers something,
Yeah.
And also I think a thing that I see a lot of people doing from a technical standpoint now, and feel free to just yak this off if it's way too technical, is that people don't think, we call it thinking inside and out, right? Where people will be well, I stuck my best lens on and I went out and I shot all these photos and they look all nice and they look coherent because they're all shot on the same lens. But what you're lacking is the exposition. You're lacking these big wide shots, which you really need to help tell the story. Yeah. And you're lacking these really tight details. Yeah. You end up if you have a story that's just 12 medium shots, you're okay, cool. But at the same time, the photos didn't tell me the story.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a struggle here that we have with various, folks. And when we bring people in and you try to, you try to share that or do it yourself, but things happen.
Yeah,
people come back with
right.
the same.
I tell people like, okay, you found a cool thing to take a picture of. Just go and take the standard picture of it, and now take 10 steps back and take another picture of it, and now take 5 steps forward or 10 steps forward or whatever, and then take another picture of it. And like that's really how you have to think. And I think that's something that's kind of lost because we're not as consumers, we're not used to necessarily seeing these series of photographs anymore because we scroll past them one at a time.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a technical thing that I think people like those two things. Like once you start thinking about this like inside and out approach, like it helps with both writing and with, because it's the same thing when you write a story, you're like set the scene. And then we
look
go
around the room.
Yeah. And then we go to a fine detail
and
then we come back out to the point.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for photos, and like the video guys, and I don't know anything about video. I can shoot very pretty B-roll for you, and that is the extent of my video skills. But my understanding is like it's sort of the same thing with movie editing, where you like need these, watch a movie, wide shots, tight shots, medium shots. So I think that's something people could work on.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
No problem. And we do. If you do follow me on social, we do. My daughter and I'm trying as hard as I can to make her care about photos like I do. So we do these like photo walks in the spring and in the summer where like if people want to come and shoot film, like they can just buy a roll of film off of me and borrow one of my film cameras.
Oh, wow.
Or just like come ask questions. Like it's not a paid thing, and it probably should be, I guess. But like, we just want to teach people. So,
share it.
Yeah, we do those because it's just really fun.
Very cool.
We have a good time.
Nice. Awesome.
I would love to come for one of those.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you absolutely should. And it's cool. I got to do a thing at PopSci this year. I bought an old view camera with like the big accordion. And I bought some direct positive paper, which means you shoot to paper negatives. And then you take them into the darkroom and you develop them. And I got to like walk some people through that process. And they were just like, wow, this is amazing. And I was like, oh my God, this is I was born like 30 years too early. Like this should be I should be like an old man in an apron teaching people how to work in the darkroom.
That's perfect.
Yeah, unfortunately that's not a job anymore. So
No, definitely.
Yeah, actually, my grandfather was quite a photographer, and essentially his entire darkroom is in bags on my in my basement. So it's sad because I want to reassemble it, and I'd love to, but it's never going to happen.
That's my summer project. It was my winter project, and then I didn't start on it, so now it's my summer project. It's to build my darkroom back up. But who knows if it'll actually get done. There's a really amazing. If you watch this now, there's a really amazing Ansel Adams thing going on at the Boston Museum of Fine Art, and like he's amazing. But like one of the most amazing things about him was that in his darkroom, he took an old giant camera and made it into his enlarger, and in order to be able to move it back and forth easier, he had them install train tracks in his house, which I think is such a fascinating thing.
Oh, that's nuts.
Yeah, I learned that recently, and I've just been telling people whether they care or not. You're hearing this story because it's amazing, and I love it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll hope to talk to you in the future.
Yeah, I'm around, man. Happy to do it.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.